Hey everyone, what's going on? Greg here again from Team Blast. I want to talk about Apple Maps and how I think about it for my local SEO clients. So I'm using Local Falcon to track the category search. So the keyword here is nail technician. The reason why I track category search is that Apple Business Connect does not provide the keywords that trigger an account. All they will say is brand search and then category search. So the category here is nail technician. It also could be like nail salon. So if you're like an HVAC company, a plumber, if you're a dentist, basically the category search is what I would track. I wouldn't worry too much about like specific keywords, just track the category because that's generally how Apple categorizes that via their how many searches trigger your account. So anyway, for my client though, we went from a 0% share of local voice back on September 4th to now at 33.88% on September 9th, which is great. This is how the map is changing for them. So basically top left is all red. We're not on page one. Bottom right, now there's 33% of the time that we are on page one for Apple Map searches that trigger the map pack, which is great. Now, what I always do is, just like for Google, I look at the competitor report. So the competitor report is actually really important because where I live in New York, I'm not in the city. So I'm not able to do a live view of what will show up when you do a search for a nail technician. I have to rely on Local Falcon to show me all the cached versions of all the companies that are running at the same time, who are open, who are all competing for the same area, because then I have to look at each profile. So generally, what I do is I look at all the dots that we're competing directly against, and I'm going to look at their listing. So usually, off the top of my head, I will look at things like is there any keyword stuffing going on in the titles? Do they have any call to actions? Do they have Yelp reviews, TripAdvisor reviews? A lot of things that can come from a competitor analysis. I really want to look at, say, okay, what can we do to potentially get some of this share back so we get more impressions, website clicks, phone calls, everything else. Now, to explain this a little bit, is that with Local Falcon, this isn't exactly Apple Maps specific ranking. This is actually DuckDuckGo. So the reason why that's the case is that Apple doesn't exactly provide this type of data to Local Falcon, so they have to use the next best source, which is so DuckDuckGo uses Apple Maps via their map pack. So if you search for a nail technician near me on DuckDuckGo, they're going to display 3 organic map pack listings. That's the share of local voice. It's all from Apple Maps. But we all know that that's going to be a very, very, very small share of the market share. It's actually even less than Bing. So that kind of gives you an idea of, okay, well, this is what's really the value. So the value actually is Apple Map search specific. So I took a screenshot this morning of just the keyword nail technicians, and this is what shows up for me. Now, obviously, there's more than 3 map pack listings. Now, my thought process is that if we're ranking better via share of local voice on DuckDuckGo, that should translate over into Apple Map search specific. What I've been seeing with my clients is that as we've been improving our share of local voice for our core category terms, that does result in more impressions each month, which then comes into more website clicks, more direction requests, more photo clicks, more phone calls, more services. It all really kind of lines up, but you have to kind of have a little bit of, I would say, like guesswork because you won't exactly know for sure how you're displayed within an Apple Maps search. But if you're ranking better via the share of local voice, then it should translate into Apple Maps search specific searches. Now, what I also look at though for my clients is these filters. Filters is very much a ranking factor. I see this all the time, even for myself. I'm not really an Apple Maps user, but I have used this in the past where I've actually played around with the filters before I've contacted a company, and the accepts Apple Pay is a ranking factor. What I notice a lot with my clients is that I'll ask them and say, "Hey, do you guys accept Apple Pay?" And they'll say, "Oh, yeah, we do," but we don't have that checked off on the account. So if you don't have it checked off, you're not going to actually be shown for that. So if someone clicks on accepts Apple Pay and you don't check that off, you won't be seen. So filters is a very small but very specific ranking factor. And also, it could be a higher quality as well because somebody who is going to, let's say, call a locksmith who wants to pay with Apple Pay, and if you don't even show up, you're not going to be in the mix. So you really want to go through your settings, make sure accepts Apple Pay, maybe has Wi-Fi, maybe has ADA compliance walk-ins, maybe they have a lot of different filters that you can play around with just to make sure that you are given the best possible result for somebody looking for exactly what you provide. Now, I also look at the SERP itself. So Apple does not use Google reviews. They use Yelp and they use TripAdvisor, which is actually really important. So if you are, let's say, a restaurant or a dentist or an HVAC company or anything, or moving company, it doesn't matter what it is, look at local Falcon and then compare it with an actual search within DuckDuckGo and then see what listings are actually being displayed. Usually, if the reviews are kind of being displayed, you say, oh, wow, we're not even on TripAdvisor, or maybe we're not on Yelp. That might be an opportunity to get on to get more reviews. Reviews are a ranking factor on Apple. So it's just another way to kind of get more impressions for your account and potentially even more leads. Now, I talked about this before. Compiling the data. So Apple does not display the keywords that trigger your account. So you have to kind of play around with this a little bit. What I look at as a soft KPI is name or brand and then category search. So then I'll go through each month and I'll pull the exact data for each one and say, okay, are we growing each month? Are we growing in the or are we starting to grow over time for category search? Name or brand, we can't really change too much. That's generally from the marketing efforts of the company. Or also if they do like social media, promotions that might actually increase brand search. But the category search is really important for me to track because again, if we can improve our share of local voice, then that should translate into more category searches. And then of course, place card matters too. You can see way back in September versus where we are in October now, we have growth that is taking place. That is good. That is exactly what we want to see. Again, it comes from better rankings, etc. So changes I make. So I'm going to just, show TM Blast over here. Things that I look at. So I will play around with the description. I will add photos. Photos, I think, are a bigger ranking factor on Apple than they are on Google. I just feel like Apple's more visual. So I'm always trying to ask for photos from my clients. Say if there's any photos from your team working, please provide that so I can upload that like on a weekly basis. Your hours matter. So go through, make sure you have your holiday hours confirmed if you are open or not. That is a ranking factor. You can also play around with your categories. You can play around with your showcases. And again, the filters is a big ranking factor too. So I mentioned that. Again, if you're like a locksmith or HVAC and you accept Apple Pay, be sure to check that off. And if you don't accept Apple Pay now, that might be an opportunity for you to say, hey, what if we accepted Apple Pay? Would that result in potentially more leads for my business? So something just to consider. Anyway, how much does Apple matter? So I get this question all the time. Greg, you're going over all this stuff. What's the value? Well, it comes down to pulling the data from Google, from Bing, and from Apple to kind of get that measurement. Most of the time, my clients see about anywhere between 5 to 10% of out of Google, Bing, and Apple, the leads that come through their business. So with Apple, leads are things like phone call clicks, or they could be people clicking on their booking or services button. Some of my clients actually see a higher percentage than 10%, but I like to say, hey, it's between 5 and 10%. And I think this is still important to think about because, we're all going after Google and Google is getting more and more competitive to, keep ranking. So if you're able to say, okay, if I'm getting, let's say, 30 phone calls a month from Apple and I'm stagnant when it comes to my views, if I'm able to make some changes to my account, maybe I run some local Falcon scans, see what I can do to improve the share of local voice. I go from 30 phone calls, so basically one phone call a day, to let's say 45 phone calls now per month. So that's 1.5 phone calls per day. Where does that additional 15 phone calls result? And that might be for every 5 phone calls you get, you actually get one paying customer. So you get an idea now as you're breaking down the math, you just got 3 more customers that month from simply improving your rank a little bit on Apple Maps. And that's more leads for your business without really changing too much. Plus, also, this isn't a pay-to-play platform. So it's not like Google ads or Bing ads where you're paying an additional fee for more exposure. This is more about, getting an idea of how you rank for Apple Maps and say, hey, what if we can just increase this just by a little bit? Would this be worth, what would this be worth for my business? So anyway, I'll scroll up to the very top over here because I think really all that matters is this type of view, the left and the right. So before, the map was all red. On the right, we're getting more green dots. That's going to result in more impressions, more website clicks, phone calls, and leads for my client. Anyway, thanks for watching this video and stay tuned for the next one.